I would like to welcome tonight's guest, Lily Darius, a student at Adelphi University. She is the vice president of the Mosaic Organization, an on-campus group dedicated to promoting multiculturalism and diversity amongst the campus community, encouraging individuals to acknowledge and appreciate the differences in our identity. Born in Havana City, Cuba, she has been deeply involved in the LGBTQ community since 2012. Thank you for being on the show. Holy heck. We actually did it.
Yeah, we actually went through with this.
I've known Lily for a couple of years now, and since we started college, and we've been wanting to do this show for a while to sort of, help and educate people. I know after college you wanted to be an educator and an advocate for the LGBTQ community, and I've spoken with you about issues facing the community as a whole, and one of the biggest ones I know, aside from violent individuals deciding that they don't really care for, people from that community very much, has been people not really understanding some core concepts of what it all means.
Yeah.
To be part of that community. And you've explained this to me before, and to a lot of people at Adelphi as well, but it's not as simple as a question as I initially thought. So I'm going to ask you, what is gender, and why does it matter that I would understand that?
I think that it's always a difficult term to define, and I always feel a little pressure doing so because being someone who is queer and trans can be a little difficult to define it in a way that doesn't contradict the different ways of conceptualizing it that other people in the community have.
It's different for different people, yeah.
Yeah, but that being said, I do think about this question a lot, and I do understand the different ways in which people look at it. And I think the unfortunate fact is the majority of people look at it as a fixed biological category that nobody can in any way escape. It is something that you're born with, etc. Some people actually within the community may even view it that way.
Oh, okay, so I have male genitalia, allegedly.
Do you? Okay.
Allegedly, I have male genitalia.
Okay.
And that is not what makes me my gender, or it is part of it, or what is the situation with that?
Well, if you look at it from the perspective of you were born with certain body.
Yes.
And this body has been categorized as male.
Rumor has it.
Rumor has it. Well, is this something that would exist outside of a social context? Or is this something that has been developed historically due to various material happenings that have led people to have a certain conception of a human body be categorized as male and a certain other conception be categorized as female?
So saying it matters because we say it matters almost.
Because we've collectively decided to say that it matters.
Oh, it's not even that so it's almost that the fact that it's part of our society.
Yeah, it's part of our social composition, and we segregate people into not only different kinds of bodies, but then we attach certain behaviors, expectations, ways of even thinking that we associate with those two categorizations. But the reality of the matter is that these categories are not inherent in any way. They are imposed upon people, not necessarily in some sort of malicious way. It's just the way that things have occurred. But the idea that I think we're trying to put across in the community is that that doesn't have to be the case. And there are other ways of looking at sex and gender that are more in tune with the reality that individuals experience.
And you take part in other organizations as well, not just the Mosaic group on campus, which you've played a very large part in sort of forming the way it is sort of at the campus now, but you're also part of another group on Long Island that offers resources for transsexuals as well, correct?
Yeah.
And transgender?
Pride for Youth. This is an organization that I'm a part of, and they provide services to the trans community. I think that the kind of work that they do is incredibly important due to the fact that they address the struggles that we face. I think it's important to highlight those kinds of struggles.
What are some common struggles that you feel like someone who's trans might deal with on a day-to-day basis, or things that you personally have dealt with in your life?
I think that one of the major things is questioning, first of all, like what these things even mean, like what is gender and how does it affect you on a daily basis? How comfortable are you within, these constructs that we kind of have to live within or with? How are you going to live your life in a way that doesn't make you feel suffocated and that you feel okay? And I think that in order to be able to explore these questions, you need a sort of outlet, you need a place that allows you the opportunity to ask these sort of questions, because you might feel things your whole life that you don't even understand. You don't have the vocabulary for it. But once you are exposed to the community and to the vocabulary that exists, you might feel that there is something about that.
It's validating.
It's validating, definitely. It is comforting. So, for example, like, this is not true for all trans people, but I have always felt a lot of discomfort with my body, and not in the sense of just self-image, because everybody has those kinds of issues. But of course, it is kind of an undefinable thing because of the fact that it's such a subjective experience. It is literally feeling discomfort with not only your place in society, but just your body and the way in which it is gendered, specifically the way in which it's gendered.
Is that the term dysphoria, or is
yes,
that something?
That is what constitutes dysphoria, is feeling discomfort. It can be with your own physical body, it can be with your emotional state, it can be in any sort of way. For me, it's always been both. It's always been an emotional thing, but it's also very physical.
How would you describe a physical feeling of?
I hesitate to use the word pain, but it is a kind of pain that I feel. It's like extreme discomfort with the body that you're in, and it can be a very suffocating feeling. So
it's almost like if you're sitting in a place that's very unfamiliar to you and you do not feel like you want to be there anymore.
That's one of the closest ways in which I can imagine describing it to someone who doesn't have those experiences. And this isn't a universally experienced thing by trans people, but some of us do. And going through physical transitions with that and receiving the medical care that we need is something that aids that and reduces the amount of discomfort that we have with our bodies. So that is something that I think needs to be stressed, in the sense that it's part of the reason why we seek these cares. It's not just for some sort of aesthetic appeal. It's because it literally physically harms us to not receive the care that we need. And look how.
And there's also the part of sort of the acceptance of the community as well, where it might be very difficult for some people to be able to come out as trans, people who maybe for their entire lives have always known them as male, always known them as female.
Yeah, and coming out to friends about it can definitely be a terrifying thing. For me, it definitely was. And it is something.
You didn't always wear dresses, I remember, when you started.
Of course. I slowly worked up the courage, but it is, I think, being trans is a rather radical position to hold in society, because despite everybody literally not wanting you to do that, some people not even wanting you to exist at all, or telling you that you're mentally ill. So, having all of these external hateful comments and still being able to do it, I think is a testament as to how important it is to us and how much it satisfies us on a deeply personal level.
It's important to who you are as a person. That's completely understandable.
Of course, yeah.
And discussing things, I'm sorry, you were saying? Well, we're discussing things about coming out to friends as well. I'm sure with family, it's also a completely different thing as well.
Sometimes, I would advise sometimes people not even come out if their families are likely to kick them out of the house or something like that, because the amount of trans people that are homeless is unbelievably disproportionate, because their parents kick them out of their houses once they find out that they're trans, and they're like, don't come into this house unless you dress how I want you to dress, and unless you identify the way I want you to dress. And so they think that they're helping their child by doing that, because it'll toughen them up or whatever. And make them be a certain way, but you can't make people be the way that you want them to be if it's something that is clearly so important to them. Mm-hmm. So usually it just ends up damaging us far more. Thankfully, I haven't experienced that, but I know that some people are under certain circumstances where that would happen. So it's a difficult situation coming out. So, I think one of the primary needs that we have as a community is educating parents and families.
So when you spoke to your family about this and your parents, mm-hmm. you told them, this is part of who you are. Mm-hmm. Going into that, what were you feeling? What were you thinking? What were some parts that you really weren't sure about, or maybe you definitely needed to say, or what was kind of going through your head then?
Well, I was scared as to what their reactions were going to be. I mean, I was pretty sure as to how I identify and how I want to live my life, but I didn't know if they were going to accept it. And they didn't in some respects. Like, they're not totally okay with the way that I am, but it's something that they have progressively gotten over. And at least I live with my father alone, but he did not kick me out of the house. So it's something that I'm grateful for. It sounds crazy to say that, but it is because of the high statistic of trans people being kicked out of their houses. So I was scared and anxious, and I definitely wish I didn't have to do it. Like, I wish I didn't have to come out to people. I wish it was just turning a switch. Yeah, it was just understood, but unfortunately, it's not. So it is a very difficult thing, and people do not facilitate it often enough.
And that's why the communities are very important to have. The people that do understand, the people that are around you are able to help maybe educate people in your life who may not be able to understand it, and also as a support thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are support groups for families where they can go and learn about this. They just have to look it up online. It's not difficult, and you find resources for family support groups.
I actually did end up speaking to, I did an interview at the Pride for Youth Center a short while ago, and I spoke to the director of outreach there, Aiden Kaplan.
Oh, nice.
And we actually spoke a lot about, what the center offers and some resources on Long Island it has.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take a look.
Pride for Youth. Last week I visited their offices at 2050 Belmore Avenue and was invited inside for the very first time. I was immediately impressed by their hard-at-work staff, immaculate facilities, and their, quite frankly, amazing puns. Their common area was home to many of their programs that they run for the LGBTQ community. After my brief tour, I sat down with the head of outreach to discuss what the center does for the community. But one thing that I was certain of, no matter who you are or where you come from, Pride for Youth would have a place for you here. The proof being in their breathtaking wall mural. You could be a mermaid, a centaur, a satyr, Greek, cowboys, Egyptians, and witches. Yep. Witches.
Thank you very much for meeting with me today.
Absolutely.
So what are some resources that the center offers to members of the LGBTQ community, or not just the center, but also maybe resources in the general area that people would be able to utilize?
So as far as just general, when we're talking about the LGBTQ community accessing services here, we have, of course, our Coffee House program, which again is something that I facilitate, and that's every Friday night. We also have...
Could I ask what the Coffee House program is? I'm sorry.
Yes, that is our drop-in center, the opportunity for the kids to come in and access the counseling and the social. So it's from 4:30 to 11:30 every Friday night, and the goal really is to give the kids a space that's devoted to their identities, but also gives them that social component they might not be getting anywhere else. Transaction is another program that I run. Transaction meets every single Tuesday, starting today actually, really exciting.
Oh, that's awesome.
From 4:30 to 11:30. Big expansion happening for this program because we are seeing that young individuals who identify as transgender, gender non-conforming, or non-binary are coming in at a much higher rate than we've seen before. They're accessing services, they need services, and they need individuals running these programs who share their identity, who can make that connection. I am trans-identified myself, and coming in and connecting with these kids is really important, and giving them a space that's really devoted to their gender identities, where everything else we do here is really focused on sexual orientation. This is a space that's just for them. Of course, we offer programs like our Empowerment program and our Empower Vita program and our Empower Plus program, which are all for individuals who identify as gay, bisexual, or queer men and trans-identified individuals to come in and have a space that is to talk about sexual health. Now, Empowerment is for really anyone coming in for that space. Empower Vita is for those who are immigrants to come in, who are LGBTQ identified immigrants to come in. And then Empower Plus is for those who are HIV positive. And then once a month, they have individuals who are HIV negative come into the program as well to be part of that social space.
So there are a lot of individuals who have their own backgrounds, their own parts of it, but it's all in the one community, and you seem to facilitate all aspects of that community.
Yes, we offer programming really for anyone who's LGBTQ identified who needs a service. We try our best to really offer that service as much as possible, including the counseling. Along with all the programs we run, all of our social workers and mental health counselors on staff carry a caseload of LGBTQ identified individuals for counseling.
So that's definitely an important aspect of it. Do you offer any health care options for people that work with you? Basically resources, mental health, you've definitely named one of them, but anything else for education's sake, maybe sexual safety, things like this?
A lot of what we do is sexual health education. That's really an important part of our agency, including another role that I have here is I'm the agency's head community educator. So I go into as young as middle schools and even occasionally elementary schools up until college age. And we do presentations on homophobia and transphobia in those school settings. We talk about what it is to be an LGBTQ identified person and the ways that we, or as members of the school community, can really rise up and help support their peers. We are also really strongly connected with Northwell Health for a lot of our programming here. So Northwell comes in, I believe 2 Wednesdays a month, and they do our Project Push program. And Project Push is really offering sexual health medical care right here in our facility.
And they work with the people at the center with these programs?
Absolutely. They take up an office here. We have a medical office downstairs. They come
You
in.
have someone on staff. It's amazing.
Yes, we do, including we have HIV testing going on here. And the other really big new piece that we have going on is while we aren't necessarily partnered with Northwell Health for this, we have a great connection with them. Northwell Health last July, opened up their first ever Center for Transgender Care, which specifically offers medical care for transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary individuals. So we have a great connection with their staff and getting our youth over there and making sure they're accessing their care. Myself included as a trans-identified individual, I get my medical care there now, and it's really, they're growing immensely and including adding new staff to their staffing and making sure that clients have access to not only care that is about their transitions, but care for their bodies. There's a theory called trans broken arm syndrome. It's the idea that as a trans person, if I were to go to an emergency room, the doctor might look at me if I had a broken arm and say, as a trans person, I don't know how to treat you. And the benefit of Northwell's new center is basically saying to a client, your gender identity has nothing to do with how I treat you medically.
Does that happen a lot, actually?
It happens quite a bit. I've actually had my own cases where I've gone into emergency rooms and had doctors ask a lot of really personal and invasive questions.
That seemed relevant to the condition, or not quite?
Not necessarily. I have gone in for literally broken arms and been asked questions about my genitalia, been asked questions about my last menstrual cycle, things that might not have any bearing on what I'm there for. And we have a lot of clients reporting the same thing. So Northwell's model not only provides the hormones, the surgeries, anything a trans person might be interested in, but they're also offering, if you need to see a primary care doctor, that's a space where you can go.
Who understand how to interact with someone like
Absolutely. They're going through trainings. Devin, who's on staff there, who actually used to be a member of our staff, is incredible, is providing trainings to all of these different doctors who are interacting with patients to make sure that they are prepared to give that service.
One of the things I want to ask, though, about in the past for the center, there didn't used to be all these wonderfully named groups that were here. The Transaction Group, different trans groups actually for the center. It's more of a recent thing, is my understanding.
Absolutely. Of course, as the program grows and as new funding revenues come in and people start to realize the great and incredible work we're doing here, we do have more access to bring more clients in. So we started off, like I said, with the Coffee House program. Eventually we moved on to bringing in Empowerment, and Empowerment has kind of branched off into Empowerment, Empower Vita, and Empower Plus. They saw a need back in 2009 to start what was called Trans Group at the time. And Trans Group was a small group during the Coffee House program, if I recall correctly, that really offered a small opportunity to talk about being a trans person in society. And as time has grown, we eventually started Transaction, not last October, but the October before. And the goal was to offer kids 3 times a month to come in here for 2 quick hours and to have a social support space devoted to your identities. And we've realized, specifically right now as we're having this big change happening, that the youth need more than that. They're coming in. The last meeting we had 24 people come in for that meeting. We have youth who are interested in this service. So we've decided to expand it. So starting today, which is August 1st, Transaction will now meet every single Tuesday from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So now we're gonna have a 4-hour span every single week to talk about not just gender identity, but what's going on in your lives, but also offer us kind of a support space. So we do something that's really cool that we started last year, which we call our Transactions Summer Event Series. Every month in the summer, we go out and do something. So in May, we had a barbecue. In June, we went to the beach, I believe. In July, we are having a laser tag event. So we do specific outings that are specifically for those who identify as transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary, to not just be here in our center and yes, getting the support from their community, but these are kids who never get to walk out their door and have support in the real world.
And they have the ability to interact with all these people that have a lot of similar things to them and interact in a fun environment.
Absolutely.
And then the first thing I think when I think of trans identity, laser tag. They just go together.
Right, it really should. A lot of our kids are between the ages, right now the program is 15 to 30, so it's a pretty big age range. It's actually the largest age range of any of our programs here. And the goal of that really was to understand that trans people of any age are going through the same things, so why not have a big age range? But most of my clients right now are 16, 17, 18, and the idea of going out for laser tag on a Tuesday night when not a lot is going on is a pretty great idea. So they actually vote for the events themselves, and that's something that they really wanted to see.
So the groups normally go within their age ranges, though. Like you wouldn't have like one of the younger people and like a 30-year-old normally on the same outing. Sometimes it might be the case, but
most of our events, like our coffee house program, is 13 to 20. That's specifically a pretty small age range, and it's specifically a youth-focused program, and there's a lot of staff around for that program. Transaction, kind of the reason why it gets such a big age jump is because, again, like I said, these youth are all dealing with the same thing. So if you have somebody coming out at the age of 28 who is just starting to think about hormones, or is just starting to think about how do I come out to my parents, they're going through the same thing that my 15-year-old client is going through. So if we can access giving them, or if we can offer support to them together, that not only frees up our time to offer a lot more services to other youth who aren't getting in that space, but it gives them a chance to connect with one another and learn from one another, which they probably aren't getting a chance outside of here to do.
I think the last question before we have to wrap up is a lot of people that may have questions about what it means to be any aspect, any letter, to be queer, to be transgendered. What is something that, are there any groups that individuals like parents or people that have friends in the community, a group that they could go to sort of learn about what it kind of means and the process of it all and going through it, where they can basically be educated if they choose to do so?
Absolutely. We try to offer, for any person who can come in here who needs services, we try to offer some kind of program. So we have our Pride for Parents Night, which is the first Thursday of every single month. It is completely facilitated by our Director of LGBT Services, Tawny Engel. And the goal really is to answer those questions. Your youth is going through something that in most cases you did not go through yourself. And how can you help guide them through that? How can you find support for yourself throughout this process? And we've also found that most parents who are coming to that support group are coming because their children are young, transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary youth. I believe when the program first got started, it had much more gay, lesbian, and bisexual identified, or at least parents of young gay, lesbian, bisexual identified youth. But we're finding that the more things change and more young trans people are coming out, the more parents need support, the more parents are not sure what their fears should be.
Because it's not even just about, the trans identity, it's also about, that's the babies, you want to make sure that you know how to help them and how to be supportive of them, and that's definitely a good way to be able to be more educated about the process.
And what I tell most of my clients is to remember that when you are a trans person, you start to figure out from little signs throughout your life. Whether you've known from the age of being a child, or whether you start to figure out as a teenager or an adult, you start to figure out signs that this is not who necessarily you were meant to be. So you've had time to process that. But your parents, when you come out to them, that's usually their first moment of, oh, this is something I'm going to have to be dealing with. So if we don't provide that supportive counseling, we don't provide that supportive space where you can just say, I'm frustrated, or I don't know how to handle this. And maybe not necessarily say it in front of your kid, who might view it as lack of acceptance.
And there's a lot of other parents there. It's not a judgment thing. It's sort of like you need to know how to go about in the best way.
You've had a vision your entire life of what your children's lives are going to look like. You need some help learning how to guide that vision to something new.
Yeah, so I really found all the things Aiden was saying was so fascinating, where, the broken arm syndrome thing, where you had doctors who thought that, what their genitalia had anything to do with, how they would treat a person, in some cases medically, and, all the assets that the center offers as well for, mental health services, all the fun groups and outings that they do. But the legal stuff I found pretty interesting as well. They talked about a group, Transcend, which I believe you are familiar with as well, correct?
Yes, well, Transcend Legal is a legal firm that helps transgender individuals to change their names. Not in all of their documents, but legally changing your name. You have to personally go change your name legally in all of the subsequent agencies after you have legally changed your name.
Well, that's difficult to do, I would imagine.
Oh, it's very difficult. The process of even just legally changing your name, as I'm sure many people know, is very difficult. Anybody who's gone through that process will end up hating all of it because it's so bureaucratic, and you have to even stand in front of a court to be, to confirm that this is your identity and this is why you're changing your name and you're not an imposter or whatever.
Oh, yeah, and they have to print your name in the paper to make sure not trying to avoid any debts from people as well, I know.
They do, yeah. They print your name in the paper. This can actually sometimes be a little problematic for some people, because if they're not out to their families but they're changing their names, and their family just happens to read this, their safety can be put at risk. So there is actually an option for you to waive that. It's a little more difficult and it takes a little more time, but that is an option. And in terms of how expensive it all is, it can end up being unbelievably expensive, or you may end up getting a waiver if you apply for it as well.
So do you think Transcend definitely helped with the process of all that?
Oh no, they helped me a lot, yeah. I think the fact that we're starting to see more organizations that are starting to be developed, especially to help trans people, like specifically to help trans people, it's definitely a step in the right direction. There's so much work to be done in that respect. I hope to be a part of that in some way, but a long way to go, basically.
Always. But the steps that you take now are definitely going to be paving the way for the future generations, and that's always the hope.
That's the hope.
I think that I loved having you on my show.
Thank you for having me.
I hope we educate a lot of people today, and I believe that a lot of resources in the Long Island community are something that people can access and hopefully be more aware of.
Oh, absolutely. I hope so.
I think you are definitely going to do a good job being able to educate people in the future. And you've done very well tonight, and I really appreciate you having on the show.
Okay, thank you.
If you work on Long Island and are part of an organization or an individual working for a cause that impacts our community, please email me at benfeldmanpatv@gmail.com. benfeldmanpatv@gmail.com. And you can help people learn about how they can make an impact in their community. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course.